This episode is brought to you by A-Identified, the AI-powered prospecting tool helping financial professionals find warmer leads and close more business. Make lists of ideal clients, see your warmest intro path to each, and hang up on cold calling forever with A-Identified. Check it out at aidentified.com. Warm wins. Welcome to the WealthStack podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Rossick, the director of WealthStack Content and Solutions. I'm joined by Kyle Wiggs, CEO of UX Wealth Partners. And today's topic, we're talking TAMPs, and specifically how a platform like UX Wealth Partners is helping RIAs future-proof themselves. Kyle, thanks so much for joining me and hopping on the podcast.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Shannon. It's good to be with you.
Absolutely. So I do want to start with your background, and I always joke that this is the hardest question that you'll get this entire conversation. But tell me about what makes Kyle, well, ultimately Kyle.
Yeah, so this for the audience's pleasure was the only question that I had a clarifying question about, which is I don't know that they really want to hear about me, but
Yes, they do.
yeah, so just briefly, I started my career in financial services many years ago, and I spent most of the early part of my career as an external wholesaler. And I learned through that process that there's a bit of a disconnect between what the advisors are asking for and what some of the companies are producing. And I left there and I ran a broker dealer platform in terms of the wealth management side. And then we were sold in 2017 to LPL. And it was really taking, again, that feedback from the advisor community that we're asking questions that we weren't able to solve for on the BD side, which is ultimately what led to my time here at UX Wealth. We launched in 2020, and it was with the idea that technology was really redefining the entire world around us. But myself and some others, and in particular advisors, felt as though we were sort of missing the boat in our industry. And so we launched UX Wealth, and here we sit today. On the personal front, I love to do triathlons, played soccer in a past life, but now I'm doing my first Ironman coming up here in October in a couple weeks. So wish me luck. Hopefully I get through the swim.
Oh my gosh. Well, good luck. How do you even go about preparing for something like that? I'm always impressed when people like you're a CEO of a tech firm, but you're also still balancing time to train for something like an Ironman. How do you fit it all in?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in just subscribing to people that have the experience, that have made all the mistakes. And there's really good training plans out there that are customizable and you can give it all of your information. You know, when do you have your kids and when don't you? And when are you traveling for work? And you just take that and you put it in and that's the starting point. I think the bigger part though, Shannon, is the idea that it's not going to be perfect. You're going to miss a workout, you're going to have an accident. It just is what it is. And so I think being really flexible and really optimistic about it is what's gotten me to this point so far.
Well, good for you. We will certainly be rooting you on. I can imagine that the swimming is probably the most challenging part. At least that would be for me. I'm not a strong swimmer.
You know, this is a terrible thought to say out loud, but of the three disciplines, I'm like, okay, I can kind of screw up the bike ride and I can screw up the run, but it's really hard to get the swim wrong. So we'll hope that we get through the swim okay.
Well, you're going to be great. I love to hear it. And I love that you mentioned like that all those plans can be customizable because as somebody who also travels a lot like you for work, if I miss a workout, that's how I keep my sanity on the road is working out. So everyone knows, leave Shannon alone at least for an hour when you're on the road because she needs her time to get
Totally.
in at the gym.
Yes, it's so important.
All right. Well, thank you for indulging me on the personal side of things. I do appreciate that. And before we get into our first segment, just high level, give a brief overview of UX Wealth, who you serve, target audience, all the important facts.
Yeah, I would say like any company, it's a bit of an evolution. We really started by prioritizing and getting hyper focused on what I would almost describe as like the forgotten advisor. These are the, 25 to $85 million RIAs who are doing an amazing job for the clients and have built this, incredible relationship with them. But the industry has gone so far upstream that I think oftentimes these folks are forgotten about. And so we're multi-custodial. We serve the Fidelities and Schwabs and Axoses and Apexes of the world. And it's the idea that we recognize that for certain advisors and RIAs, there is benefit in outsourcing to give them time and the ability to scale and grow. And so that's really where we're laser focused right now. And then through those conversations, have started partnerships around outsource trading for ETFs, companies like Adapar and others. So a little bit of an evolution, but that really has been the core focus over the past, 5 years.
Well, appreciate the background and the context. I do want to dive into our first segment that I call Stats All, folks, to kick off the meat of the conversation because we did promise we'd be talking TAMPs today. And investment advisors have really flocked to TAMPs in the recent years, just seeking greater efficiencies and growth opportunities that are obviously very vital to achieving success, nothing that you don't know. But the assets managed within TAMPs have more than doubled in 5 years between really 2017, 2022, reaching around, I think it was 865 billion, according to a 2024 Cerulli Associates report. So, what do you see driving this wave?
Well, so look, I think there's many different things. It's hard to pinpoint one specific. And in thinking about our conversation, we have this internal phrase at UX. We call it the cycle of self-defeating status quo. And it's really the idea that there's so many technologies that are available to advisors that are many, many decades old. And if you combine that with the idea that a lot of advisors are doing a lot of the same investment management, they're starting to get questions from the client bases that they serve of, what am I paying you for? And so I think it's a recognition that technology is getting really good all around us, and they are going to have to get on board in order to compete with some of these technologies. And so some of the basic ones, Shannon, that jump out to us and the advisors that we serve, I think the first one is an operational efficiency. If you're working with one of the main custodians, you need some of the basic functionality that really the custodians don't provide at what I would argue is a level that is required to really stand out. It's the trading piece, the reporting and billing. That's a big one. I think the second one is scalability, right? Like if they can recognize what are the things within their skill set that they're really good at, and how can they prioritize those in spending more and more time with clients and prospects, and then offloading the things that take time, that require operational sort of scale, and also pose some of the biggest threats to their business. I mean, trading's a huge risk to an RIA. Getting billing wrong is a huge risk. I think those are two of the main ones. And then from there, I just think overall, you think about all the regulatory and compliance changes that we continue to go through. Every year, it seems like there's something new that we really need to be paying attention to. And so I think to have a company that understands what those regulatory and compliance changes are, and then can have technology to be able to meet those changes, I think is critically important.
That's a great point. And sticking with the Cerulli stats, they actually ran a survey and found that a significant portion, it was around 68% of client assets managed by financial advisors are directly controlled by the advisors themselves. So that rep is PM model. And they're acting as the primary portfolio managers rather than relying heavily on, pre-selected funds or outsource investment management strategies. To me, that seems a bit high. So what's going on here?
It's very high. And actually what's fascinating about that statistic, don't quote me on the year, but in recent years, that's been as high as 75%. So I have a bit of a hypothesis around this in talking with a lot of the advisors. I think it does stem primarily coming out of the fee sensitivity and sort of fee compression world that we've come through. And it's the idea that if you go back to 2000, if you look at 2008, a lot of the active strategies were ineffective by and large, right? Casting a very wide net. And so out of that, we really saw a shift to passive models. We saw a shift away from investment management to behavioral management. And so I do think there is this sense of that's an area where they feel as though they can have some control over, fee sensitivity and revenue considerations, both for the business and the clients. Number one. Number two, I think that once you see an advisor or a group break away from perhaps a broker dealer or a wirehouse, there is an initial desire for control that I think is really important to that community. I think that's the second one. And then perhaps the next one from my perspective is there is the perception, whether right or wrong, that by delivering their own, using air quotes, custom portfolios, there is a sense that they can meet client expectations in a more customized manner. And I think it's a mistake. they feel it's a part of their value proposition. And we'll talk maybe a little bit more about that. But I think all of those, when you put them together, give them this sense of confidence and independence that maybe they lacked in some of their prior careers, if you will, that I think is really leading to that maintaining such a high percentage of the overall assets.
I think that is a perfectly reasonable hypothesis. And really, since their introduction in the 80s, how would you say the definition of a TAMP has evolved? Especially, it seems like in the last 7 to 10 years, a lot has changed.
A lot has changed and it's changing faster. When you look at some of the folks, consultants in our space that really sort of track not only TAMPs, but just technology in general, I think we have to start with technology in terms of the evolution over the past 7 to 10 years. These platforms are getting more and more advanced in terms of the technology. You're seeing more digital client platforms and portals to be able to access. And with the advancements in these technologies, I think that one of the things that really stands out to me is a lot more customization and flexibility. So we talked earlier about, advisors using their own models. Certainly that's going to continue to hold true for a period of time. I think I see that maybe decreasing over the next decade or so for reasons we can discuss. But one thing that you're now seeing is through these technologies, the ability to blend various models, which is something that we haven't been able to do in years past. Some of the newer ones probably you're familiar with, but access to alternatives and ESG-based investing. You think about things like impact and value-based investing. These are all things that are now starting to really come into the fold. And it sort of falls with the backdrop, which is another sort of evolution in the last decade in this sort of hyper focus and shift to a fiduciary model and a shift really to a fee-based and more transparent model, model. And so I think it's all of those things that, at the end of the day, the advisors that we work with, their focus is how do I deliver a better client experience? And so I think, lastly, Shannon, to answer your question, it's more personalized service, better reporting, and more flexibility in options that they really couldn't deliver with some of the more traditional TAMPs going back 10 plus years.
So I want to dig into that a little bit specifically around the client experience. What should an advisor look for when choosing a TAMP, and in what ways does a TAMP improve the client experience, specifically, UX Wealth?
Gosh, I think when looking at a TAMP, there's obviously a number of factors. You can't ignore one of the main factors that people will look at is sort of fee considerations, and I think it's one of those things where identifying a TAMP that has the flexibility when it comes to fees. Do they do asset based? Do they do account based? Do they, and in terms of billing, do they have the flexibility to customize billing to meet the needs of the RA? Are they doing something like a gross total fee? Are they doing tiered or flat or breakpoint? So having all that flexibility, again, to meet the needs of the client, I think is really, really important. The second piece is in terms of technology. An advisor is not going to do a demo with a technology firm who's going to tell them, the things they don't do well. And one of the considerations is we did a study in 2020, roughly, and we asked advisors what was more of a priority to them, to have an outsourced CIO to help them with investment allocation or an outsourced technology officer. And it was overwhelming. It was outsourced technology officer. And it's because they're such great advisors, but these technologies are getting better every single day. And so I think identifying a TAMP where you can have a partner that understands the nuances of technologies across their tech stack and can help them ensure that these things really do integrate seamlessly and that you get a bi-directional data flow as opposed to kind of a point in time. And so I think those would be some of the initial considerations. And maybe the last one, I think it's important that you look at the contract. Some of the TAMPs that exist today, you've got 5-year terms, and think about how much our lives change every single year. And I think finding a partnership with a TAMP who can not only meet your needs, but then prove through the service and the technology that they provide you and your clients is something that's really critical, as opposed to getting locked into something that may create frustration and resentment, 3, 4, 5 years down the road.
So read the fine print, folks. That's what it
Yes.
comes down to. All right, Kyle. So myth bust a little bit for me here. How do you quell fears around these statements when it comes to TAMPs? I've heard these a lot from advisors. The sentiment, it's changing, but still out there. You often hear things like, ah, if I use that, I won't have control of my business, or clients will think I'm outsourcing my work. We'll have to learn a whole new system. Who has time for that? Myth bust that all for me, please.
There are some myths that are absolutely true. So we won't focus on those at the moment. I think that the ones that are really important, Shannon, I'll take the ones that you've listed. So first and foremost, when you're working with a TAMP, the newer ones should have the ability to brand everything to the advisor that they serve. So really think of it like the intel inside of an RIA. If done effectively, the client should never know, in our case, that UX even exists. So one of the things to consider and to be aware of is there's two ways to structure the TAMP model, if you will, at the custodian. There is a traditional TAMP, and there's what's called an outsourced agent. And we fall and did a lot of work on this early to fall under that outsourced agent agreement. And the reason why is because under a TAMP structure, there's often a lot of paperwork at the client level that is required. When looking for a partner, I have gotten feedback from the advisor community that they don't want to involve the clients. They have discretion. They've set up their RIA. They're just looking to outsource some of the key functionality so that they can do the things that we've talked about thus far. So that'd be my first one, is to really try to understand how you can actually gain more control of your business, not less, number one. And then number two is identify a partner that can brand everything from statements and fact sheets and reports to you, and they don't even know that, we or another TAMP exists. So I would say those are some of the big ones. In terms of learning a whole new system, newer technologies, if you think, if any of those listening either have young children or have family members or friends that do, you give an iPhone to a 2 or 3 year old and they can figure it out almost instantly. And so some of the newer technologies that are coming out today, and one of the things that we really prided ourselves on when designing our platform, was the idea that we named the company UX, which in the world of technology stands for user experience. You should be able to get into a platform and not have to feel like you're actually learning something new. Think about, like, for those of you that have driven a Tesla, you get in and you go. That's what you're starting to see with a lot of the newer platforms. They're much more intuitive. And so I would say that the ones that you've laid out are certainly ones that we can bust for this conversation.
So are we going to start seeing ads then for UX Wealth, like the old E-Trade baby commercials where a child can use a TAMP platform?
Totally. Yeah. Well, if you pay for it, I'll come up with the creative and we'll be good.
Honestly, I may take you up on that, so do not
Okay.
tempt me. But I
Done.
digress. I want to get a bit technical here. We
Okay.
obviously have to talk about AI and machine learning in the context of all of this. UX Wealth, you've been very forward thinking when it comes to AI and machine learning. So I have to ask, what role does AI and ML play in enhancing the capabilities of a TAMP, and what are you working on?
This is a loaded question. So AI and machine learning have become, probably not saying anything that anyone on this podcast doesn't know, but it's become really in vogue. And so I think whenever
Mhm.
that happens, there's some misconceptions around when you say AI or you say machine learning, that can mean so many things. I like to start with sort of a kind of a reset from my perspective. There's a good way to think about it. So if you think of Tesla, Tesla for years, with all their resources, has been working on autonomous driving, and largely they've gotten a lot of it right. But if you talk to them, what they will talk about is that the reason it's not 100% there yet is because the problem is it's still too big. There's still too many unknowns and there's still too many variables. And so when working with AI, I think the first question to ask if I'm an advisor is what specifically, how specifically, excuse me, are you using artificial intelligence? What role does machine learning play? And what are you trying to solve for? And if they cannot clearly articulate that, then the AI is only as good as the question that you're really asking it. If you've ever used Chat GPT, you ask it a specific question, you get a really good answer. If you ask a vague question, you get a vague answer. And so in our industry, to your question, I view it in sort of a couple of different buckets. I see a lot of folks starting to use AI to automate and improve sort of tasks that we do day to day. So whether it's responding to emails, whether it's helping process data and information, that's certainly something that we're doing, creating more of a personalized approach for clients, client engagement, things of that nature. That's number one. Number two is you think about data processing. We can now upload statements and we can ask it, hey, I'm going to upload 100 pages worth of statements. Give me the top three things that are the biggest gaps in this particular client's investment scenario. So that's something that can be very useful. How we look at it, and those are things that we're working on to integrate, but some of those technologies aren't fully baked yet. Where we have really prioritized AI and machine learning is actually as it relates to decision making from an investment management standpoint. And so here's the reason why. If advisors are scared about fee compression, and we know that the Googles and the Apples of the world are investing a ton of money into this space, my concern is that if we continue to all do the same things in the same way for another 10, 20, 30 years, that the technology is going to pass us by. So we have gotten involved very heavily in the AI and machine learning investment community and really asking the question, can technology help us over time, not all the time, it's not perfect, make better investment decisions for the clients that we serve? And that's something that we are starting to see more and more of. In fact, Shannon, I'll give you some homework. There's a great documentary called AlphaGo.
Okay.
It's about an hour long and it's on YouTube. And it's really how artificial intelligence has redefined the gaming world. So think in this instance, the game of Go, which is similar to chess. You think about poker and some of these other games, which we always thought humans were best at, when in reality, we're learning things from these technologies that we never even realized existed. And so as we apply that back to investment management, we're seeing the ability to eliminate human emotion, human bias, and ultimately human limitation to attempt to create a better risk return outcome for a subset of assets that the advisors are helping the clients with.
Well, that's very interesting. I will certainly check that out. And you kind of read my mind a little bit because I was going to ask you if you could share specific examples around how AI is being used to improve, client portfolio management and ultimately that decision making within a TAMP.
It's a huge one. So, real world scenario, we back in 2018, I was with an asset manager that was doing this, but it was a little early. So I think people were still really nervous about it. And we were actually engaged with a particular TAMP who was really known for its service. They were well recognized for service. Where they had an opportunity to improve was on their asset management capabilities. They were getting feedback from the advisor community that the performance maybe wasn't meeting expectations. And so we had brought in some concepts using AI and machine learning. And the initial feedback that we got was, well, that's our job. And I think, unfortunately, our industry's still not there, but we view it as a threat rather than an enhancement to make us better at what we do. There is no denying the fact that AI can help us process information and get to very clear sort of expectations, if you will, in a way that we just can't do on our own anymore. There's so much information out there. And this particular TAMP, ultimately, instead of going that direction, solving the problem, which was investment related, they chose to prioritize behavioral finance.
Mm.
And I sort of joke, I said it was like, instead of fixing the problem, they hired a shrink to make you feel better about the problem. And I think that we can do better. So what you're starting to now see is the ability to grab some of these technologies and execute them at scale across multiple custodians. And so I think that we're just scratching the surface there, and there's so much more to come. You go to, the University of Texas, where we have a partnership, or other universities across the country, and the heads of quantitative finance departments are doing things with these technologies that is going to absolutely redefine our industry. The question for the advisor to ask is, are they going to be a part of it and kind of grow with it and integrate it where it's appropriate? Or are they going to try to play catch up after this is already here?
Absolutely. I've said the same thing. We are just scratching the surface. And if you are not at least dabbling with these technologies, you're probably, unfortunately, going to be left behind because that's just the way of the world now. I mean, you look at other sectors, say, for example, retail. They collect so much data on us, and we didn't think twice when we started getting personalized ads all over our social media platforms or emails. It kind of just became ingrained in the culture. But obviously, wealth management, a little different, extremely sensitive topic to have that personalization around it. But we have the data, so I think we're going to see this mind shift kind of in our industry of folks getting more used to having that, because at the end of the day, I don't want to receive canned messages from advisors or other firms with the usual jargon. I want them to know me and be able to say, yes, I can trust you with making financial decisions that impact my life and my day to day. So I'm curious to see. I always joke and laugh. I always think about when it was Target several years ago. There was a huge news cycle about this poor girl. Her dad found out that she was pregnant because she was shopping for things on Target, and he started getting the emails, and it caused a whole thing. And but at the same time, like, that industry has already used AI and data to create personalized experiences for that person.
Totally.
So we are headed in that direction, absolutely.
Yep.
Um, so one more question before we get to our next segment. You actually recently launched the Experience platform. So I want to hear a little bit more about that and what users can expect and ultimately what's on the roadmap for UX Wealth.
Yeah, actually the question I get often is, why did you guys decide to do it? There are plenty of them out there. And it really does come back to this disruption that's coming. AI within wealth management, specifically in the investment management community, it is coming. It's getting better and better by the day. And so one of the challenges that we ran into is we went to the advisor community and we shared with them some concepts and ideas, and the feedback was really positive. It was not perfect, but it was really, really positive. And as we tried to implement that, maybe the analogy I could give you is it's like having a race car engine and putting it in a car that, like a Toyota Corolla, not putting down Toyota Corollas. I used to have one,
It's okay. We
but
love our curls. They're
yeah,
reliable.
love all the Corollas out there. But all kidding aside, we couldn't execute it. So I'll give you a couple of specific real world examples. So a lot of the firms had trouble trading massive baskets across custodians almost instantaneously. So some of these strategies need to be executed within milliseconds across tens of thousands of accounts across four custodians at a really specific point in time. Maybe it's 2 minutes before market close. And so we really did try, and that was one thing that we ran into, was the inability to trade these things. So we ended up having to build out our own order management system to accommodate it and connect it and tie it into Bloomberg and a whole host of other things. The second one was the feedback overwhelmingly, if I were to take sort of the masses, was I love this for parts of my business. I don't love it for all of my business yet. And so it was almost like a prove it concept. And so in order to accomplish that, if you're an advisor and you have $1 million account, maybe you want to take 25% or some other percentage and put it in something that's using AI and machine learning. And that is a complement to something you've been doing for the past 20 years. That sleeve level functionality is really critical, meaning true sleeve functionality is I have one account that I can divide in as many slices, if you will, using different investment concepts, themes, ideas, but they don't intersect. So I can sell out a Tesla in one sleeve and keep it in another sleeve. The trading piece is important in that functionality, as well as the billing. You might have four different managers in one account. Can you accommodate, from an accounting perspective, the ability to do all of that appropriately? And then the last one's reporting. So we needed a system that could report at the household, but then a household is made up of accounts, and then accounts are made up of sleeves. And so the ability to pinpoint where are we having success and where are we maybe not having as much success was something that didn't fully exist. And so we designed a cloud-based modular system in order to accommodate those things. And that's where we sit today. We really focused and prioritized on the guts of the platform. I like to say, the foundation of a house and all the plumbing. And so now that that's done, we are shifting our focus to things like full integrations. So looking for and identifying companies that have an open source API in the back end where we can pull in something like a CRM, financial planning tool, risk analysis tool, pull that into the platform, have bi-directional data flow. That's really what is the priority for us as we turn the page.
Love to hear it. Well, thank you, Kyle. But it is time now for segment two of this episode that I call Ask Us Anything. And I have gone out to the social universe and asked them to submit questions they want answered by you. So putting you in the hot seat. And we did have a few folks slide into the DMs this week. So, question number one for you. What do you see as the next big trend in TAMP technology?
I think we touched on it to some degree. I think the next big trend is figuring out where best to introduce and use artificial intelligence to create a much more hyper personalized experience for the clients and for the advisors. I would say that that one is going to get just a ton of attention over the next decade, and it's just going to get better and better. I would say that's the main one.
Love it. Second question. You've obviously seen the headlines with, Morningstar getting zapped up by AssetMark, their TAMP side of the business, BlackRock investing in GeoWealth, things like that. There's a lot of M&A space, or a lot of M&A activity in the TAMP space. So is there enough room for everyone to play and the quote unquote smaller players to compete?
So, as a smaller player today, I think it's a tricky question for all the smaller players to really think about and consider. The smaller players, so to speak, the UXs of the world, who've not taken on any outside capital, maintain the ability to really listen to the advisors, and they're much more nimble to be able to adapt not only to the advisor demand, but also to the client ask, and then all of these new technologies that are coming. One of the challenges that I have observed personally from some of the smaller folks is that they take on capital from a VC company or PE, and then all of a sudden it's like you don't answer to the advisor anymore. You answer to them, and it's all about ROI. And that's, I think, the really delicate balance that folks in my shoes, so to speak, need to be considerate of. I'll tell you where the smaller players are better. And this is directly from the advisor community. It is, again, number one, access. You can pick up the phone and talk to anyone within the company and have a conversation about a problem you're having versus getting into a queue and just getting that sort of frustrated service experience. That's a really big one. And then the second one is, if you were to go out and buy a home, and maybe it's an older home, you can't, yes, you can go through an inspection, but think about the challenges that you might run into, right? Where they may have remodeled the kitchen, you may have a faulty foundation. And I say that because the technologies have changed so much in the last couple of decades that in some cases they're trying to make them talk, and the experience is just not good. And that's where I think the newer, smaller players absolutely have enough room to be able to compete.
I think I would have to agree with that. Appreciate you being put on the spot and your very
Yeah.
insightful answers. But we have come to our final and what might be my favorite segment that I affectionately call Stack It or Whack It. And
Okay.
yes, I have t-shirts to go with it if you ever want one.
I want one.
All right, I'm bringing one then to the conference for you.
All right.
So I'm going to throw out a few technologies. Be warned, they're not always necessarily well tech related, sometimes
Okay.
random thoughts, especially if I know you. And you tell me if they are essentially worth the hype or not. So stack it, use it or whack it, aka lose it. First
Done.
one I got for you. AI stock pickers, stack it or whack it.
As we sit here today, whack it. I think going back to the Tesla analogy, that is a problem that's too big. And I don't think that it is ready. When you're dealing with something that is so important, like someone's money and making investment decisions, I think individual stock picking, there's still some work to be done there. It's absolutely coming. But as we sit here today, I would say whack it.
Love it. All right, one whack it. Second one I got for you after a little online snooping and just getting to know you better. I came across that you were the former captain of the San Diego State soccer team. So, have to ask around sports tech, stack or whack goal line technology, and things like video assistant referees or VARs. So, is that too much tech in sports or making it more fair and transparent?
Okay, so for me personally, two things can be true at once. I would absolutely stack it, particularly in soccer. So soccer is one of these sports where I don't know, for years there's so much subjectivity, I feel like, as a former player, and you see these conflicts with coaches and players and referees. I love the goal line technology in particular because you remove all that subjectivity. So I think that is a home run. I do like the VAR. I think that the area that, if I had one criticism, and maybe it just gets better with time, is that it feels like at times it slows down the flow of the game, not just in soccer, but in other sports as well. And so I look forward to, I absolutely think it's necessary. I see it coming into baseball and other sports as well, like soccer. And I think it's going to really improve the overall game itself. I just look forward to when it doesn't slow down the flow of a game like soccer.
Nope, that makes sense. All right, I like it. One whack and one stack. Kyle, it has been just an absolute pleasure getting to know you and hearing all of your insights today. Please feel free to tell listeners where they can find out more about you and what you're working on at UX Wealth.
Yeah, and first of all, on behalf of the entire company, thanks for having us. This was so fun. I definitely want the t-shirt. But in terms of finding more information, keep it super simple. You can find us on LinkedIn under UX Wealth, or you can go to our website, which is fairly straightforward. It's just uxwp.com.
Love it. And be sure to like and subscribe to the WealthStack podcast on all major podcasting platforms and follow all things WealthStack on wealthmanagement.com, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Or if you call it X yet, I cannot do that. And if you want the in-person WealthStack experience, join me June 10th through the 12th at the Boca Raton Resort in Florida for Wealth Management Edge in 2025. Thank you all for tuning in. This episode is brought to you by Identified, the AI-powered prospecting tool helping financial professionals find warmer leads and close more business. Make lists of ideal clients, see your warmest intro path to each, and hang up on cold calling forever with Identified. Check it out at aidentified.com. Warm wins.